move to this co-main event of the evening. Fascinating flyweight matchup. And guys, I'll tell you where I do well. I'll tell you where I do poorly. The truth is, doing my end of the year analysis, I noticed I have not been profitable in the flyweight division for men's or women's MMA. Now, for the women's MMA side of things, I actually know the root of that loss. I would be slightly negative in the flyweight division overall, but I'm very negative because of a massive loss I took on Amanda Hebos against Caitlin Chukagian. Still think she won that fight, but it was very close, went the other way. I had 9 units on Amanda Hebos at plus 165, but this is why we stress some of the lessons that we learn over time. I was a little aggressive there in a women's MMA fight. I thought that there was insane line value. I thought she should have been the minus 200 favorite, but overall that assessment wasn't correct in hindsight. So you got to learn the lessons over time. Now, what's interesting is when you're looking at the flyweight division for the men, I'm only about minus 1 unit lifetime, but that's still not positive, right? So I'll tell you guys where I do well. I'll tell you where I do poorly. In the flyweight division, I've had bouts of success, right? I've had Tetsuro Taira. He's made me a ton of money, like 20 units, but also I've had, blind spots. I've had, over betting on fights not to go the distance, certain things like this. So you have to look at your own betting habits and realize, hey, these are some leaks. These are some problems I'm having. I want to clean these up in the future. Because if you're not learning, you're going to make the same mistakes over again, right? We're always just trying to learn from our mistakes time in and time out. What's interesting is last iteration of this fight, this is a rematch, right? At the top, we got a rematch in the light heavyweight division. In the co-main event, we got a rematch in the flyweight division. When this fight took place the first time, guys, I was doing content on YouTube. I put out a video about why I thought Matheus Nicolau would win this fight. I bet him as an underdog at the time. And the thing is, when I'm looking at this spot in the rerun, he's a bigger underdog, right? And I'm less inclined to bet him on this rerun. Now, I'm not the best at betting rematches either. I want to go back and look at my overall results on rematches, but my results on rematches recently has been up and down for sure. I could give you guys a recent example of Royval and Pantoja. When they fought the first time, I bet Pantoja at chalk. I got it right. I made the money. When they fought the second time, I bet Royval at dog odds, and I lost the bet. So you look, and I'm not saying that I'm a perfect predictor of these fights over time. Sometimes I'll get it wrong. Sometimes I'll switch sides and get it right. Sometimes I'll switch sides and get it wrong. An example of me switching sides and getting it right is the Stipe trilogy, the Stipe matchup with Ngannou, right? I picked Stipe the first time they fought because of the championship experience. And then I picked Ngannou the second time they fought because of the championship experience, right? So when I'm looking at this spot, I really have a bad feeling for a guy like Nicolau in this matchup because he's taking on a guy in Manel Kape who is a very explosive finisher, right? He's a guy with a lot of power. He's recorded, I believe, 5 knockdowns in his last 4 UFC fights. That's a very impressive stat when you consider the division we're talking about, right? If a heavyweight was doing that, that's one thing. We're talking about the flyweight division where not every fighter can record a knockdown at all. This guy has been recording a ton of them. Now, on the Matheus Nicolau side, he hasn't been a slouch either. I believe he's 8-3 to the knockdown in this division. So he's done a good job being precise. But what's different to me is that Matheus Nicolau has really caught a bunch of guys that were not very durable. For example, Matt Schnell, not a historically durable fighter. When you look back, he was able to drop, I believe, Smolka 3 times. He was able to drop Bruno Correa, although Bruno Correa was able to drop him as well. But when I'm looking at this matchup, Manel Kape came into the UFC and he looked a little bit tentative. He looked a little bit awkward. And I think part of that was the difference between competing with and without wrestling shoes. I mean, if you guys have ever, trained with wrestling shoes versus without wrestling shoes, it's a massive difference, right? Your ability to get control of somebody's leg or their foot is massively different when they have shoes on and when they don't have shoes on, for example. So I think that when you look at a guy, like Kape. He's used to having traction. He's used to being able to create explosive power. And he kind of came into the octagon where we've seen guys that have been in the octagon many times slip, fall on the canvas because it's slick at times. So I think Kape needed an adjustment period to the octagon, but I think his activity level has been starting to get up there, right? I think he's starting to get results commensurate with his skill level, right? I think he was underperforming when he first got to the UFC. And frankly, when I cashed that ticket on Matheus Nicolau, I felt very grateful. I felt very fortunate. Even at the plus money price, I was like, man, it's a close fight. And, Kape could have got this win, right? With a better strategy, with a better game plan, with a better performance on the night. Manel Kape easily could have taken that win. So I didn't think I had a massive edge at a small underdog price. Now, he is a bigger underdog in this spot, so you could argue that you're getting more potential line value, and he won the last time. I can't really push back on that, but this is a gut feeling sport sometimes as much as it is numbers and data sport. And my gut feeling is that you got one guy who's moving in one direction as a prospect and another guy who really just got checked as a prospect. The loss to Rival, brutal, bad knockout. It'd be one thing if that was the first time in his career that had happened. But unfortunately, against Dustin Ortiz back in the day, he suffered a brutal knockout loss in very similar fashion against Pedro Nobre back in 2012, another first round knockout loss in brutal fashion. So this is a guy who has been subject to getting knocked down, to getting knocked out, to getting flashed, to getting buzzed, to getting hurt. And I really worry about that because in the flyweight division, for a guy his size, he's cutting a decent amount of weight, I'd have to assume. And, it doesn't get easier with age, it gets harder, right? And he's not that old a guy, right? These are both, prospect age fighters, looking at it. You got one guy who's 31 in Matheus Nicolau against a 30-year-old in Manel Kape. But for me, it just feels like Manel Kape is a little bit more durable. And I also think he's probably the more dangerous finisher. So if Nicolau is not able to get this fight to the ground, if he's not able to neutralize the power and the explosivity of Manel Kape, I think he's going to be in trouble on the feet because I don't know that he could take the shots from Manel Kape. And I think Manel is getting better at mixing up his targets, moving through space a little bit more. And I just think that Matheus Nicolau, I worry about where his confidence is going to be at coming off that knockout loss. That's very tough to deal with, right? And I think that when you're coming back from that against a guy who's got a surging wave of momentum against Manel Kape, who, by the way, is motivated to get that win back. I've said this before, but I always felt this in my personal experience. When I beat a guy, I never wanted to go again. I was like, that's it. I got the win. I'm cool, man. I don't ever need to do this again. But when you get that rematch, right, you have to find that motivation. You have to find that extra push. And it can be hard at times, right? It's hard to beat a good guy multiple times. It could be one thing to beat somebody good once, but to beat a good guy multiple times in a row, man, it gets really tough. Think about, the trilogy that we saw with Holloway and Volkanovski. Obviously, it's at a different level, but when you watch those, right, there was one time where Max Holloway looked like he really might have had it all figured out, and then they did it again, and it looked like, damn, Volk is better by a mile. It's like when you start running these fights back multiple times, even great fighters can start to get disparate results, or things could look very different. And I just think that right now, coming off that knockout loss in the first round, it's like a brutal reminder that, hey, I could get chin checked. It's happened to me before. It happened to me the last time. It happened to me 10 times ago. It happened to me in 2012. The way that I lose fights is I get buzzed on the chin, I get clipped, I get hurt. And this guy is a powerhouse. And this guy is violent and he's aggressive and he wants to come out here and hurt me. I think that's a horrible recipe, unfortunately. So I like Manel Kape in this one. Pre-tape, I got to do a little more research here, but I understand why he's the favorite here. Despite losing the first fight, I just think it's about context. It's about timing in this fight game. And I think Manel Kape is in a better situation. And I like his skill set, right now. I like his training. I like what Kape's doing. Give me Kape to get the win.